part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Bases loaded, 1 out. 1 ball, 2 strikes on Fryman. Into left field, base hit. In comes Ramirez, and the Indians win Game 1.
And he hits a line drive, left field. Mabry going back and will play it off the base of the wall. Ramirez will score, and Fryman will go into second with a double. Santiago ready. A look at second to pitch. Fryman hits one high and deep to right center. Back goes Dye on the track. This ball is gone! A 3-run game-winning homer for Travis Fryman to right center. How about that? Well, what a way to celebrate a home opener.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for stopping by to the very latest edition of the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. We're your hosts, John Sabol.
And I'm Scott Sabol.
Thanks for tuning in. We've got a really cool guest here. This is somebody that, if you're a Cleveland fan, an Indians fan from back in the late 90s, early 2000s, following the sports scene here, you know all too well. Scott and I watched him quite a bit in his 5 years in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. Coming over in a trade with the Arizona Diamondbacks. Scott, you remember that trade?
I do remember that trade. I can't believe that. Yeah, that's right. Brings back a lot of memories. I can't believe that was a lot of years ago.
Exactly. We'll go with that. Yeah. He played Major League Baseball 13 years, 5 with Cleveland, 8 with Detroit, a 5-time All-Star. And one of those All-Star years came in 2000 at the nice ripe age of 31. He now works for the Cleveland Guardians organization. We'll get into all that. But ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast, former Tribe third baseman Travis Fryman.
Thanks for having me, guys. Look forward to our time together.
Travis, thanks for taking the time with us here. We're excited to talk baseball with you. So I did mention there that you work with the Guardians. What exactly do you do with the team? I know you had some other opportunities years ago in the minor leagues, which we can get into momentarily, but what is your position with the franchise as we speak?
Yeah, I think my title, I haven't even looked. I think it's advisor to player development. I've been in a couple of roles throughout the years, but it's been 16 years I've worked in player development for Cleveland. I managed for 4 years. I was the infield coordinator for, I don't know, I had the official title maybe for 4 years. I actually did the job. I did dual duty a couple of years where I both managed and oversaw the infield development. And then I needed to spend a little more time at home. As my boys were growing up, wanted to see their ball games, tournaments, things like that. And the Guardians or Cleveland was very gracious with me and let me transition into a role with a broader title, but a little less travel requirements. And so now we're an interesting organization, but I do everything from help with the infielders to staff development to really contributing in a variety of domains, new staff onboarding, foundations, a variety of things. So a lot of fun to work in the Cleveland organization.
Was working in player development always a goal when you retired in 2002, something like what you're doing now? I know you mentioned you managed. Do you want to get back into management?
Yeah, interesting question. No, I actually did not ever aspire to that. Most of my teammates, people around me thought that I would probably pursue managing one day or saw me in that space. My father was a high school athletic director, basketball coach. I probably talk and act like a coach just because my dad was one. And but to be honest with you, when I retired, I kind of wanted to know a little bit more about myself without looking through the lens of baseball, sports, and performance. That had been my entire life, really. And I really did not have any intentions of coaching when I retired. And I actually served as a volunteer full-time in my church for the first 5 years after I retired. I was a director of men's ministries there and served as a deacon. And then my father passed away unexpectedly at age 63, and just line after line of former students and athletes that he had impacted over the course of his teaching and coaching career showed up at his funeral. And it really just struck me how impactful and important a coach can be in the life of young men. And I just thought, that's not a bad way to invest your life. And being retired, I had some time on my hands and an opportunity to choose how I wanted to invest that time. And if I could find a way to find some balance between my professional and personal life and do it in a way that impacted the lives of other people, I thought coaching is not a bad way to do that. My wife nudged me out the door. I called Mark Shapiro and let me look around the organization for a year, and then an opportunity arose to manage at the rookie level. And my heart has always been more towards young men rather than necessarily competition or the major leagues. It was really more about impacting the people around me is what drove me into coaching.
It's interesting that, you were able to identify that you needed to find yourself outside of baseball right when you retired, because there's so many players that don't do that and they become lost. As you're talking there, you had that 4 or 5 years that almost like a line of demarcation from when you played to your life now. And it seems like you're a richer person for it.
Yeah, I was very cognizant of that. As I played, I came up in Detroit. I was really young on a very old team. I mean, I broke into the major leagues at age 21, and they had a lot of veteran players and really great men. Frank Tanana, of course, Alan Trammell was my mentor as a player, and a gentleman named Dave Bergman, who played a long time in the major leagues as well. He's passed away from cancer now. Very impactful on me as a young player and a man. And they very much would talk about just what a short season of your life playing really is, thinking about the future, thinking about life after baseball. And, I'm kind of a one-trick pony. I'm one of these, I'm built like a horse with race blinders. Whatever I'm doing, that's the only thing in my world. Like it works great in baseball, makes for a lousy husband and father sometimes. And it works well in the performance-oriented spaces. And so I know that about my personality a little bit. So, but I knew, being a performance-oriented world, you just want to know a little bit about what you're like without that. And for me, I had been very involved with Baseball Chapel and other things. So I tend to think in broader perspectives a little bit as far as my career and all that go. I had framed that fairly well for myself. But I didn't want to jump back into a profession that oftentimes brought out the worst in me, not just the best in me too. And athletics and performance-oriented spaces can do both for you. So I was in no hurry to stay in that space.
2 questions to follow up on that, Travis. You mentioned your father I imagine he was a huge influence on you growing up, especially as you climbed the ranks in baseball.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you grow up a coach's son, of course, all you hear about is defense and practice, right? So, it's interesting that I mostly coach defense, and I'm the guy that harps on practice more than anybody in our organization. So that's not surprising in the least. So, he had a huge impact on me. My wife says now I have to wear readers all the time now, or I'm a useless human. My wife says, "Oh my God, you look just like your dad," So I nap about every day I'm home now, just like my dad. I never was a nap guy. So yeah, my father was a huge influence on me. He was a very successful high school basketball coach. He grew up in Kentucky. Adolph Rupp was his hero. And my dad was a great coach, very well prepared. He was an eye dotter and tee crosser and game plan. I mean, basketball is the best place to watch a coach, in my opinion. I think they impact the game more than almost any other sport. And if I watch a basketball game, I watch the head coach. I don't even watch the players, to be honest with you. So, yeah, my dad certainly had a big impact on me.
Yeah, interesting point about basketball, because I kind of get what you mean by that, because I think with baseball, you're kind of sitting back. Football, there's so much going on. Hockey's so fast paced, whereas basketball's got that right speed and tempo where you can, and the right amount of players on a playing surface on the court where a coach can really dial down and dial into you.
Yeah, especially at the amateur level. I think a little bit like in Major League Baseball, the coaches do all their work before the game. The preparation in the modern Major League Baseball is off the charts pregame. And then, during the game, they've thought through almost every inevitability. They're prepared for that. And it's coaching in one sense, but mid-game, an amateur a college basketball coach can really impact a game. In my opinion, it's not just about turning the athletes loose. I mean, John Wooden said there are 3 keys to winning, right? Number one is always have better players than the other team. I think, he was right about that, and that hasn't changed. But he also said, always practice simplicity with repetition, right? And always have players that value the team more than themselves. And those are the 3 keys to winning. And but I think watching a really good college basketball coach, a very successful high school basketball coach, is very enjoyable for me to do. Mm-hmm. And I think that some of the best coaching you'll see, and watching those guys run a practice session, a really great, college basketball coach, high school basketball coach runs a great practice. And, and I guess one more thought on that. I mean, my dad always said he could tell me everything he knew about basketball in an hour and a half. But the key to being a great coach was learning how to get the most out of your players. Mm-hmm. And in my coaching experience, I found that to be pretty spot on as well.
You had minor league coaching experience with Mahoning Valley Scrappers a few years ago. What was that experience like for you in your player development journey?
Yeah, it was fun. I chose to work at that level. Mark was a little surprised. That's why I told him I wanted to work. He's like, "You want to work in rookie ball?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." And, some of that was my own introduction to pro ball was not ideal, I guess. It was probably the norm for that period of time where a lot of organizations hired a part-time guy, maybe a college coach or somebody to coach their rookie ball summer league team. So it didn't feel like this great introduction to professional baseball, which is a very special opportunity that you get. I've always wanted to work at that level. So when, an opportunity presented itself there, I jumped on that, and I enjoyed it very much. I enjoy, again, I got into it for the impact on young men, not trying to aspire to work in the major leagues. So maybe my perspective is a little bit different than a lot of people that get into coaching, or at least what motivates you or how you define success. But I loved it. Love working with the players. I love being the one that introduced them to pro ball. And I think, like a lot of things in life, your first is very memorable. And so you're the first manager for most of these guys, at least back then, out of the draft or young players. And for as long as they play, you're going to have a unique connection to that player because you were their first introduction to pro ball. I feel that way about Lonnie Chisenhall, Jason Kipnis, others that I had, during their very first stint in pro ball. So,
going into your before you retired, obviously, your last year in baseball, we're going to kind of go backwards here.
Yeah.
And your final year in 2002 at 33, I remember watching an interview with you in might have been like late August, early September. And I think it was at the time on Fox Sports Ohio, talking about how you already announced your retirement with like a month to go in the season. And in that interview, you said you wanted to give Mark Shapiro a heads up so they could start calling some of these younger guys up, and that you wanted to let them have their moment, but to also help the franchise along so it's not so delayed and kind of get a head start on everything, which I thought was very, admirable on your part, but also, very cool to see, because I don't think you see that a lot in players these days in any sport. You were 33 at that time. You were dealing with, I think, a shoulder injury, a couple other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you know heading into that 2002 season was going to be your last? Were the injuries already starting to creep up?
No, there were a lot of factors that contributed to that. I had my best year in 2000. At the end of the year, I was having a little bit of elbow pain, but at that point I'd played 10, 11 years. It's not out of the ordinary, right? So went into my off season, did sort of my usual stuff. Elbow pain didn't really go away. And then went through spring training, and by the end of the spring, I still having a lot of elbow pain. I noticed, I thought my bat speed had dropped off a little bit. I've always been able to throw pretty well, and wasn't throwing the ball as well as normal. So I finally said something to the trainers, and we're near the end of spring training. I'm like, my elbows, this has been lingering. It's not going away. Something different. Anyway, they went in there, and I had like an 80% tear in my UCL. So it wasn't the choice was, there's a possibility of a UCL reconstruction, which at that time is a 13 to 15 month rehab process. Or you could, potentially try to rehab it and find a way to play through it. Well, we were supposed to be really good in 01. We thought we were going to win our division for sure. I'm not going to pass up on that opportunity. And so, I just said, well, screw it. Let's, I'll rehab it and let's get after it, and I'll try to play through it. And so I think I'm not the best guy with facts in the past. I don't dwell on that stuff too much, but I think I started the year on the DL. Anyway, I didn't play very well. We did win the division. I played pretty poorly. In the process of playing with a torn UCL, it really changed my throwing mechanics, and I ended up tearing my labrum in my right shoulder. Well,
wow.
So I opted to have labrum surgery at the end of 01 rather than a UCL reconstruction. And I rehabbed that all winter and went back in 02 and thought, well, if I'm not able to perform at a level that I expect, I'm going to be faced with a dilemma. It's right. I can either retire or I'm going to have a UCL reconstruction, fix the elbow. That means miss a year. Hopefully you come back to spring training with a where you're trying to make a team, that kind of thing. And I played very poorly. Shoulder labrum surgeries are not particularly successful. Bat speed had dropped off. I wasn't a good player. And, but if you'll remember in 02, there was a looming strike labor agreement as well. And I had lived through the 94 strike where we ended the season with no World Series.
Mm-hmm.
And it literally was coming down to the last seconds. The Tigers were in town in Cleveland, and by all accounts, we were going on another strike at midnight that night. And I got up that morning. I'd played poorly. I just told my wife, I said, you know what? I've thought about it. I got 3 young boys. I'm 33. We've already played almost 13 years. I'm going to call it a career. So I called Mark and asked if I could come in and see him on my way to the ballpark. And the Tigers were in town. There might be a strike that night. I could say thank you to both franchises I played for. And I didn't want to take a chance of the season ending and not saying thank you to the people that had supported me in my career. So I went in and I told Mark that I was going to retire. There was a buyout clause in my contract for, I think, to the following year. I had made a decision, my wife and I did, that we did not want to accept the buyout clause because I was not going to come back and play. What are you buying me out of? Mm-hmm. So I went in and told Mark I'd made a decision to retire, and that I was not going to accept the money from my buyout clause. I wanted to give that back to the Indians organization and say thank you for the way I was treated here. And I felt brutal about being a bad player for 2 years, in 01 and 02. And they asked me if I would do a press conference that day. I really did not want to make a tour having announced a retirement, but we all thought we were going on strike at midnight that night. And so the Tigers in town, it just seemed like the easiest, a natural line of departation, if you will, to just say thank you and do it all with one press conference, both teams and the fans, and say thanks. And then if the season ended like it did in 94, I will have at least had an opportunity to say thank you. So that was the primary motivation for me retiring when I did. And then we solved the strike with 30 seconds to go till midnight, and I had to play for a month having announced my retirement, which is not what I wanted.
Right.
So at that, it was, hey, let them know they don't have to play me. Like, you know what I mean? It's like they would play you out of respect. Then we weren't, and it was like, well, if you need to see other people play, you got 02, we weren't good. So we weren't playing for anything that mattered. I know you need to make plans about the future. Don't worry about my ego. It's fine. And so that's a little bit probably, John, of what you were alluding to is, but that wasn't the motivating factor. The motivating factor was the Tigers were in town. There was a possibility of a strike that night. And I had already lived through the ending of a season. And I wanted to say thank you to both organizations and to the fans who supported me. And that, having realized that ending a season is a very real possibility. I'd been through that once. Mm-hmm. I just felt like that was the right time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Was Shapiro surprised that A, you announced, and then B, you didn't accept your buyout clause?
Yeah, that was a little shocking to them. I don't know that I think one or two people may have written about it. I never said anything about it for a long time, and I don't really talk about it. Not trying to necessarily make. I don't want to. And other players, I had some teammates that didn't understand that. Like they felt they had buyout clauses too, or whatever, and felt like maybe they felt some undue pressure on that. And I'm very adamant to them. This is just something I wanted to do for the Indians to say thank you. I felt bad about not being a reliable player the last 2 years, and I was treated great there. And I loved playing there. Made some really close friends. I got a chance to be in the postseason, and I wanted to maybe just give something back to the organization. It seemed like an easy way to do it. And so, yeah, I don't know that he was totally surprised that I retired. I think Mark and I had gotten to know each other well enough at that time. Chris Antonetti was, the assistant GM then. I didn't know Chris other than just casually at that time. I know him quite well now. But, yeah, I think he was a little surprised by that. It wasn't my plan. My plan was to play 20 years and wear one uniform like Alan Trammell did. That was my
right.
I was crushed when the Tigers traded me. But that was just something I did. It ended up being a lot harder to do than I realized. I mean, legally, I had to redo the contract. It registered the MLB. I had to pay my agent his cut out of it because he had negotiated the contract. So I had that, that was kind of stupid. So it actually cost me money to give it away. But it ended up out great because with the extra money that they didn't know they had, they were able to sign Casey Blake the next year, who played great for us. And then we were able to trade him for,
Carlos Santana. Yep.
That's how we got Carlos Santana. So in a really interesting way, that money played a pretty good return on investment. So it worked out great.
Oh, how's your arm?
How's your arm right now? Can you still throw your elbow, your shoulder?
Oh, up until about four seasons ago, I could throw like an hour of BP a day. But about 4 years ago, my shoulder finally went kaput, and I've only thrown BP maybe 10 or 12 times, like in the last 3 or 4 years. So I need a shoulder surgery now that I don't want to do because I don't want to miss time doing. I can function in life, but the human arm's not meant to be up here and throw. So
right.
But I have some trouble sleeping sometimes on that side. I'm being a little lazy, not getting it done just because I'm a little selfish with my time. So I'm just dealing with it. But
Travis, Scott wants to know if you could throw BP because we want to take batting practice with you one day.
That was kind of my
throw BP. I can do that. I threw some last week, and I've been doing some tubing work and rehab type stuff, and just to try to help our coaches when I come into town. I like to try to give them some rest if I can. So if I can throw a BP group and give a coach some time off, I like to do that in my travel now.
So before being traded to Cleveland back in '98, you were with the Tigers for 8 years. What was it like playing? Because my brother and I loved visiting at the time, old stadiums, talking about old stadiums. What was it like playing in Tiger Stadium versus playing at Progressive Field?
I mean, I loved it. I'm an old school kind of guy, right? I mean, that's kind of at least what I'm known for. I mean, up until 5 years ago, I still wore stirrups every day. I mean, I grew up a Cincinnati Reds fan. I got to play for Sparky Anderson for 6 years. My youngest son's named after him. I mean, I loved it. It's weird, but like if I have a baseball dream, I'm wearing a Tiger white uniform. You know what I mean? It's like, I love the old stadium. I love the connection to the history of the organization. Like Al Kaline, those guys were always around the ballpark. Mr. Kaline, of course, broadcasted and did stuff too, but a lot of them were around. And then playing for Sparky, a lot of the Big Red Machine used to come see him. So I got to meet a lot of my childhood heroes too. He knew I liked Cincinnati, so he would always introduce me to those guys when they'd come visit. So I love the old stadiums. I love the connection to the history of the game. I'm a fan of the game before I was ever a player, right? So it's special for me to be in the old stadiums. That's where I feel most at home. The modern stadium with all of its amenities, I really appreciate because I work in player development now. I love the care that we provide for our athletes and players now. It's impressive. But I think baseball, I still like the old stadiums with the small dugouts and the high grass, and funky outfield walls and all that good stuff. I love that stuff.
Wasn't Terry Francona a coach with the Tigers back in the mid-'90s?
So Terry, I have two younger brothers. Terry managed my middle brother in Birmingham back when Michael Jordan was there. My brother played for him a little bit, and Terry got his first major league job when Sparky retired. Buddy Bell got the managing job in Detroit, and he hired Terry to be his third base coach and his coaching staff. And that's when I think I might have met Terry during the strike year. I flew down to see my brother play. I'd never seen him play ball since I had become a professional, and he was in Double-A. And so I told Kathy, my wife, let's just jump on a flight and go down and see Troy play. And I think I met Terry while I was there. Troy introduced me, but yeah, he got a third base job with us in Detroit. So that's when I met him, and he was young and super ambitious and pretty, charismatic guy, and got the job in Philadelphia managing a couple of years later. So.
Travis, the Tiger Stadium thing, I remember 99, my brother and I took a trip there, and that was the last season of Tiger Stadium. And I remember walking in there with Scott, and the tunnel that you'd go into, I think, Scott, we walked in the third base side, if I remember.
Third base side, yeah, third base. Mm-hmm.
It kind of like, I never was in Yankee Stadium, but I know obviously where Travis and Scott was too. And Municipal Stadium in Cleveland had the same kind of feel where you'd walk through the tunnel, then just everything opened up.
Yeah,
I absolutely loved Tiger Stadium. In going there and all the neat little quirks about it, the flagpole in center field, the overhang outfield, the upper deck all the way around. And there were a couple times in the last 15 years where if it wasn't Scott or myself would drive through Michigan for certain things, I'd stop at Tiger Stadium. Then it was, just when I saw it in 2015 was right when they were starting to redevelop the area. Scott, you saw it, 2010 maybe, and it was half gone?
Half gone, yeah. They were tearing it down at that point, yeah.
Did you ever get anything from the stadium?
I did. I have 6 bleacher seats, actually, when they tore the old bleachers, took the bleacher seats out of the lower section behind home plate. They decided to upgrade the seats for, I don't know, season ticket holders or a more premium ticket. I really don't know. And I knew the groundskeepers pretty well, and people that worked there had been there a while. And so, and I've always driven pickup trucks. And so I had my truck up there, and so season ended, and the grounds guy told me, he goes, man, we got a room back here where we just threw the old bleacher seats were just thrown in some space in the back of Tiger Stadium. And I'm like, gosh, what are y'all doing? He goes, I don't know, throw them away, I guess. And so he goes, oh gosh, could I buy some of those or have them? He goes, you take as many as you want. So I could fit 6 of them in my pickup truck. So I brought 6 of them home, and had them sandblasted and powder coated the metal. And my brother built my brother's a custom home builder and carpenter and all that good stuff. And so he built me some nice pedestal mounts. And so, yeah, I've got 6 bleacher seats from Old Tiger Stadium. And then when I retired, they gave me third base from Tiger Stadium as a gift, which was very nice. And
so that's really cool.
Ernie Harwell as well. Now we're very close, and his wife Lulu. And my wife and I were renovating now and getting ready to downsize now that my kids are out of the house. And so I've been packing stuff up around here and getting rid of stuff. And I ran across an old cassette tape of Ernie Harwell broadcasting my first hit in the major leagues that he had given me. People, and I got to find a tape player. I don't think I have a tape player around here, but I'd always heard the best view in Tiger Stadium was the broadcast booth that actually overhangs part of behind the plate. I don't know if you are that familiar with it, where you would be sitting if you were broadcasting from a mic like you are now. I'd always heard that's the best view of the stadium. So my last year there, I actually walked up in there for the first time to see it, because Mr. Harwell always said what an incredible view it was. And I had heard that, and he's right. It was an amazing view from there. And so, I hate you didn't get to see that, but that was the view to have in Tiger Stadium.
Wow.
It's a shame they weren't able to keep that venue in some capacity. I mean, it laid vacant for almost 13, 14 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Jim Schmenkel is the home clubhouse manager for the Tigers. Was all the years that I played there, and I think he still is. Been there forever and a day. And so Jim was very good. When I retired, my wife threw me a little surprise retirement party, and Jim went back into old Tiger Stadium, vacated and dilapidated and fallen down, and filmed all around it, and just kind of, we just said, some nice things about our time together in Detroit. It means a lot to me, but it showed the stadium just sort of falling down, everything around it. It was kind of sad to see, again, it was my first, right? That's where I think about baseball, is on the corner of Michigan and Trumbull.
Yeah, that's it's always sad to see those stadiums kind of fall to disarray. That's a big hobby that Scott and I have. We love the history of particular stadiums, and we both have a seat from the old Cleveland Municipal Stadium, which is kind of a funny story. We've talked about it before on podcasts before, but Scott basically was driving by when they were tearing down Municipal Stadium and was able to grab two.
And I knew one of the security guards, and and he said, "Hey, you want me to get you a couple of seats?" I go, "Well, absolutely." Threw them in the back of my car, and
that's awesome.
That's awesome. How it went. Yeah.
Well, you guys just said something that reminded me about that. When the Tigers hired Bo Schembechler, I don't know if you guys hear that. Wonderful man. I really came to like and admire him a great deal. Great guy, and did a lot for the Tigers organization. A lot, really. And I don't think you get a lot of credit for it. But about building a new stadium, he had told me that they were going to make plans to build a new stadium. And what he said he said, if you've ever been to Rome, he goes, you ought to see the Colosseum. It's an amazing place. He said, but I guarantee you one thing, they don't play any more games there. And he goes, we got to build a stadium. So that was his take on it. I always thought that was probably right. I loved Old Tiger Stadium, but working in player development, I have a son that's playing minor league baseball. I love the facilities and the way we care for our players today. It's so much better for the athlete. You get a much better performer, and there's just we care for the whole player now, not just the performer. And in my day, it was just they cared about you as a performer, not the whole person. And the facilities and all that's put as part of the process now. It's better today by far.
Yeah, you outgrow those stadiums, and even something like Progressive Field, they're going to be doing a massive 3-year renovation process to it. Yep. And even like through COVID, for instance, people don't know this, as member of a media, like they now have a dedicated room to do post-game interviews in. Before that room wasn't even existed then. I think.
Yeah, we did Pilates there that back then. I know the one you're talking about. There's one, you're talking about the one, there used to be one right off the locker room that they did interviews in.
Yes.
Yeah. That used to have a Pilates machine in there, slide board, some vision stuff they used to do.
Yeah.
Pretty edge back then, but yeah.
I mean, like that stadium's already almost 30 years old.
I love it too. I love going there.
Even the concourse and structures, they have to continue to update to the newer times. So like in one of those rooms outside the locker room at Progressive Field, Travis, you know this too, was an old like photographer room, which is, I believe now like a multimedia room for trainers and maybe player development people for like you. Cause I remember walking by there seeing that used to be a different room. And now it's just all these computers that aren't for media, but for personnel like yourselves.
Yeah, that's the old video room, and it's still the video room. It's just been expanded greatly because that's, tech and analytics and video is such a huge part of the daily preparation routines of our athletes now. We have huge departments now and personnel that support that and compile all that information. And so they took an old performance, what we call performance coaches now, sports psychology. Dr. Charlie Marr used to have a little office off of that room too. That's all one big room now for video analytics, information like that. So I don't spend a ton of time up in Cleveland anymore. I like to focus on player development, but it's impressive. And, the newer stadiums are almost gaudy. I hate to say that, but I still like Progressive Field. It's got great feel. I love walking around. I'll sit in different locations in the stadium just to have a different perspective or to find the best soft serve ice cream too, by the way. the line's not long. I got a sweet tooth, so I love soft serve ice cream. So I'll find there's one on the, I think, the very top up there. So I do a talk on perspective, finding perspective for our minor league players, and sometimes I share some images from different perspectives in Progressive Field, and just where we sit sometimes affects the way we see things, and correlate that to finding perspective on your adversity, injuries, whatever that success, family, whatever that may be. But I love every view from Progressive Field. I haven't seen a bad one yet.
I'm really curious about these renovations they're going to do. I'm really excited about how everything's going to look in a couple of years once it's all done.
Yeah, I am too. I'm excited to see it.
Before we get into your Indians career, Travis, I have one last question to you about, well, I guess your retirement real quick. Do you remember your last at bat and what you did?
I do, because I think your first and your last you remember. So I don't ever think about it. But my memory is it was the Royals, I think, and it was double down the left field line, or between third and the third baseman and third base, which is, everybody laughed, said, yeah, that's appropriate. That's pretty much what you did your whole career, was hook balls down the line. So, and my first hit in the big leagues was against the Royals too. And so my first hit was against the Royals. My last hit was against the Royals, which I thought was a nice bookend to my career. I take it as confirmation. It was the right time to retire. At least that's the lie. That's what I tell myself. So,
very good memory. Do you remember the count?
I got no clue about stuff like that. Nothing.
It was a 2-1 count. I looked it up on Baseball Reference.
My wife made me keep, or they gave me the scorecard from my last game, the official, whatever was in the dugout on the board. So I actually have that out here in my barn somewhere.
Nice.
I think Coco Crisp was in the lineup. Actually, Jim Tomey's last game as an Indian as well.
Oh, wow. That's right. Yeah. I think the run, it was an RBI double, I believe, right?
I don't remember, but that sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll have more with Travis Fryman right after this.
What's up, everyone? I'm Holly Wetzel.
And I'm Tybus Powell.
And we are your hosts of The Orange is Oranger, a Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. We give you all the dog pound coverage that you'll need to get you through the regular season, hopeful postseason, and I'd say off-season, Tybus, but is there really ever an off-season for this team?
Thankfully for our podcast, Holly, there really never is when it comes to the Cleveland Browns. Don't miss our breakdown of each week's matchup, game recaps, and any and all news out of Berea to feed your Browns appetite. As we know, Holly, dogs gotta eat.
Yes, they do. So hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode of the Orange is Oranger, Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hi, everybody. It's John Tellage from the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast. Be sure to hop on with us to follow all the dramatic developments of the reigning American League Central Division champions. From game analysis to interviews to keeping tabs on who could be the next breakout star. We'll have that and much, much more right here. It's the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe here and join the fun.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
Well, let's fast forward to your years in Cleveland. Early 2000s. You still had Lofton, Alomar, Ramirez. Ramirez was gone at that point. But what was it like playing with those guys in the late 90s, early 2000s? Because Cleveland was in a transition period then, kind of like what the Tigers are doing back in the mid 90s. What was it like playing in Progressive Field with a lot of those guys that, honestly, some of the best offense we've seen in decades?
Yeah, Manny was there. Manny was there every year that I played there. So,
oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. There. He didn't leave till later. It was awesome. I mean, good Lord. I mean, I came there, I got traded to Arizona during an off season when they did the expansion draft, when they were adding Arizona and Colorado to baseball. So I was traded from Detroit to Arizona for 3 expansion picks. during the offseason, and then a month later traded to Cleveland for Matt Williams. I think it was me and a left-handed reliever for Matt Williams. And so Matt was part of the 97 World Series team. So I came over in 98. They were still sold out every home game. So that was incredible to be on the tail end of that, to get to experience that a little bit. I had only experienced it in Detroit when people that wanted to see Cleveland would come to Detroit to watch Cleveland. We'd have more fans when Cleveland came to town than our normal games in Detroit at that time. Great. I mean, you had an all-star almost at every position for a lot of those years there, which is a great way to play because no one person feels the brunt of the load, like they have to support the team. That's one of the great things about playing with so many great offensive players. And it certainly cemented some of my perspectives on baseball today. I mean, if you ask me today, you're only as good as your pitching staff, to be honest with you, if you're going to win. And that's why the Indians or the Guardians today are built around pitching. We could score 1,000 runs, but when you can't match up with Pedro Martinez or somebody like that on the mound, you're not going to win a lot of baseball. You're not going to win the big games that matter. You just can't. So we could score runs, we could hit. We played great defense, but we were always middle of the pack pitching, really, and that was why we couldn't get over the hump. We were as good as we were capable of being, honestly. So, but it was special. I mean, those guys were incredible. They were incredible athletes. I played a little different brand of baseball coming from Detroit. We were, Sparky Anderson, so stirrups every day and, sport coats on the road, slacks and all that stuff, and respect the game and be respectful of your opponents. And, we were proud of that. And you played that way. And I hated the way Cleveland played when I played against them. I mean, they started all the walk-off stuff at home plate where they all about that. They were the guys that started all that in baseball. And I always thought they played the game with a lack of respect when I was but I'm on the receiving end of them being really good. So I don't apologize for being a sore loser. But so I had no love for Cleveland whatsoever. I got to be honest with you. There are about 4 or 5 teams I didn't want to be part of, and Cleveland was one of them. Now, I didn't know anything about the front office or how they treated people, any of that. I just didn't like their brand of baseball. And so when I got traded there, I'm like, oh, man, this is going to be an adjustment on my part. So, and I came there, and it was great. I mean, it was 5 great years, incredible players, special talent. I mean, really, one thing you learn when you get to that level, there's some pretty special people walking around the planet. I realized I wasn't one of them, but a couple of those guys were. I mean, you couldn't do what they did. You just marveled and watched it every day and thought, man, that's incredible. I mean, I would pay money to watch Omar Vizquel play shortstop any day of the week. I have 3 sons, and I'm very proud that, that one of them, Jim Thome, was his favorite player. Awesome. There are a lot of players that I would not want my kids looking up to. Jim Thome ain't one of those. Right. Real deal. Love Jim. So many, and those guys were just special talent. Manny Ramirez was an incredible hitter, right? David Justice, he loved the bright lights, man. When the big playoff games, things like that, he was a really good player. Sandy Alomar, still a friend, and I love playing with Sandy. And then being able to be on the same field with Omar and Robbie when we got Robbie over there, watching those 2 guys play every night was unbelievable. And then, Kenny Lofton was a great center fielder, played well for us for a lot of years. So, and a lot of others as well. Charlie Nagy, I loved being a teammate with Charlie, and it was special. They were great players. They were fun to watch. I'm not surprised that people came to watch them like they did. They were exciting.
Well, thoughts on the current Guardians? Their offense in the last week and a half seems to be waking up. Are you concerned with their inconsistencies?
No, I mean, I think, again, perspective matters on what the Guardians are and are not, right? I mean, we're an organization that has to, we feel like we have to do everything almost better than everybody else does because we are fairly limited with our financial resources. So we have to acquire players smartly. We have to develop them better than anybody else. We're almost completely dependent upon our ability to produce the players we need from within. We don't get to we don't get, we can't get too carried away in the free agent market, right? We have a gap to fill. We can't just go buy the best option. So we're going to by circumstance and by design at this point, because we very much know who we are. We have an accurate identity of who we are as an organization. We're going to be dependent upon young players that we produce from within. And when you get young players, you get a certain amount of volatility, right? I mean, that just comes with youth in general. And then, you're not buying a proven performer who's done it over time like you do in the free agent market. You're still dealing with a lot of uncertainty and unknowns. And so, you get a Jose Ramirez, that's that's your dream. That's the pinnacle, that you sign a guy for $25,000. Nobody liked him. Even you weren't sure what he was for a couple of years. Now he's one of the best, 3-4 players in baseball. And then he's been loyal to the organization too, right? He could have gotten a lot more money on the free agent market. And so, that's your dream, but those are pretty rare, right? So we know who we are. That comes with inconsistencies. That comes with some volatility. You want to be consistently competitive. You do all those things right. Player development. You grow the whole person, not just the player, and you build your organization around elite pitching, because the elite pitching is really what wins baseball games at the end of the day. You're as good as your pitching staff. I really believe that personally. I'm not saying we as an organization necessarily would say it that black and white, but I really think you're about as good as your pitching staff. And so I'm not surprised about volatility. Terry and the coaching staff, they do such a great job. You'll see a lot of volatility in our teams at the beginning of the year, and then you see them creep up. And then we usually hit some hot stretch. And we've been competitive year in, year out for quite a few years now. And that's, we're in a division that's weaker, but all you got, it's where we want to be. It's what works best for us. So I'm not surprised, nor am I concerned.
All you got to do is get into the playoffs, and you never know what can happen for sure. And that pitching is going to be big. Yep.
You get lightning in a bottle in the postseason. The team that's hot right then, right? That thinks they can win. Another coach and I tried to define the word momentum in sports a couple of years ago. And what we came up with is where one team feels better about their chances than the other one. And that doesn't necessarily mean by the score. And so sometimes you get in the postseason, you get a young guys that are just stupid enough to think they can win, and they find a way to do it. We dang near did it in 2016, right? Mm-hmm. So, that's our hope that we pull that off. I want to be part of that one day. I hope, contribute in some small way to that. One World Series winning it the right way would be really meaningful. If the Guardians ever do it, it will have been done the right way. Yes, I still say Indians quite regularly. I see you smile there, John.
Well, it's funny because I cover the team, so I catch myself still broadcasting, and I'm like, the Guardians, But then when I casually talk to like friends or my dad or Scott,
me too.
Hey, you want to go to the Tribe game? I mean, it's never going to change. So I'm with you on that.
Right.
Yeah. I don't do it disrespectfully, and I very much respect the Dolans. I know why they did it, and I understand. And I support their decision, however they want to do. But like for a year, I wouldn't wear any Guardians paraphernalia they gave us. I only wore my Block C stuff. It was my little personal, just nod to the way it goes. But I understand it, and my feelings and respect for the Dolans and those that made that decision far outweigh any personal feelings I have about it. And their intentions were good.
All right. Before we wrap this up, we do this thing, a lot of the guests, Travis, where we do a little rapid fire, where we throw you a baseball question, then a fun question, first thing that comes to your mind. We call it rapid fire, but sometimes the guests will go a little longer than rapid fire, which is totally cool too. So without further ado, you ready for some little fun?
I'll do the best I can.
All right, here we go. The best hitter you've ever seen in your playing career?
King Griffey Jr.
Most intimidating pitcher you ever faced?
Intimidating. Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm not sure if the word applies, but Pedro Martinez shoved it up my tail. I'm 2 for like 6, so I think that qualifies. I wasn't intimidated by him, but I dang sure couldn't hit him.
Wow, that's not surprising. I thought you would say Randy Johnson, but Pedro's right
No,
up there too.
I enjoyed those battles with Randy, but Pedro still pisses me off. I never could hit the guy.
During your playing career and when you come back to Cleveland, what is your favorite was your favorite Cleveland restaurant?
Oh, that's shoot, Cabin Club out in Rocky River out there, the steakhouse. Love that place.
Favorite visiting ballpark and city, aside from Detroit and Cleveland, because you played here.
Yeah, favorite ballpark was Camden Yards. Not my favorite city. I liked Seattle back then. I'm sure it's a rougher. Looks like on the news it's not an enjoyable place to walk around as it used to be. I liked Seattle.
Yeah, I still can't believe Camden Yards moved the left field fence back. I think that was a big mistake. Outside of baseball, what are your favorite hobbies? Our listeners can't see you. We're on Zoom here. I see, the deer antlers behind you. So I assume hunting is one of them, obviously. But what is something else?
I'm actually an archery guy. All this is archery stuff. I don't really enjoy guns, so I've always been into archery and build my own arrows, work on my own equipment. I hunt with archery tackle, so I enjoy archery hunting and archery in general. I do a little saltwater fly fishing too. I'm from Florida, so I enjoy that as well.
Memorable major league moment. You covered a couple of them, but is there one that's right at the top of your list?
That's a good question. My favorite major league moment did not come as a player. I was a fan in the stands of Game 7 of the 2016 World Series when Ray John hit that home run in the 8th inning. That was my 25th wedding anniversary, and my wife was not with me. I was with my middle son at the game, and my wife couldn't be there for that game. We had been to some of the others. That moment, I was just part of the organization, contributed, but I was sitting in the cheap seats where my tickets happened to be that the Guardians got us. And I'm surrounded by Cubs fans. I know I'm being long-winded here, but there's this kind of funny. It's all Cubs fans around me. Ray John hits that home run. I think we're getting ready to win the daggum World Series. This is awesome. And I'm looking around, and there's a lady next to me wearing a Cleveland Block C stuff, and she's looking for somebody to celebrate with, and we're surrounded by Cubs fans. And I turn around, she sees me, and I'm wearing Cleveland something, and she grabs me and kisses me right there. So I kissed another woman in my 25th wedding anniversary in Game 7. That isn't the favorite moment. My favorite moment is just how the Ray John's home run and what it felt like to have contributed to that group of young players that were on the team representing us. I was more proud of that moment than any all-star ring or anything I ever did personally.
Wow, that's a great story.
Scott's going to get really upset with this because we always bring this up, Travis. I know we're cutting into rapid fire here. I was also at Game 7. I came up, and Scott's very jealous that he wasn't there. And I was with my mom and my dad and my sister. You can see Scott squirming over here.
Yeah.
He's still pretty jealous about it. We had seats. My sister ended up getting the tickets, and us four went. My mom, my dad, my sister, and I. And we had seats third baseline. And I just happened to be filming on my phone when Rajai Davis hit that home run. Wow. I got it on camera.
Wow, that's awesome. That's the most electrifying moment I've ever been a part of in my life, as far as just stadium and all that. Nothing I've ever been part of rivaled that moment for me.
Yeah, it was incredible. I don't know if you can see it on the Zoom, but you can kind of see.
Yeah.
How I caught the home.
I'm up, I don't know, 20 rows up on the first base side, probably. It might have even been second level, to be honest with you. Look at the picture.
That is so cool.
But I caught it, and I just happened to follow it with my phone, and then right when I saw it past the foul pole, I grabbed my dad, and we went nuts. But
yeah, well, don't delete that, man. That's a keeper.
Definitely.
A couple more, and then we'll wrap this thing up here. Your best player you've ever seen play with or against? You said hitter and pitcher. Griffey and Pedro.
Players, so many great players, and I played with a lot of them, and they all were things I admired about them. Two players that I think had the whole game, the whole package, from hit for power, defense, base running, smarts were Robbie Alomar and Ichiro Suzuki. They had no weakness. They did everything well. I might even put Ichiro above that as I watched him after I retired, just a little bit, but they both were the complete package. There may be other guys that were better hitters or more power, or but dude did everything great. Those two guys. Pedro, I never figured out. He was pretty incredible. The more I've watched him broadcast, I don't watch a lot of baseball on TV, but I've seen him broadcast some games. He's pretty smart too.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of understand now part of why he was so successful. He didn't just have unbelievable stuff, but he's a good thinker, real smart. He knew what he was doing. There was thought and intention behind what he did. I probably didn't give him enough credit back then. I just thought he was just more stuff and ego, but I realize now he was pretty sharp.
Yeah. And Ichiro is known for his preparation. I mean, he's probably taking batting practice now.
Yeah, I got a call when he first signed with Seattle. I got a call from a former teammate of mine that was playing in Japan, Melvin Nieves. Yeah, he's played with him in Detroit. And he called me and said, "Travis, I think this is the best player I've ever seen." And of course, I'm like, "All right, Melvin. He's playing in Japan against Japanese players." I'd gone over there back when MLB used to take an all-star team to Japan and tour for a couple of weeks. They're not as physical as we are. They don't play a power game. Let's don't get too carried away here, And then after watching him for like about 2 years, I'm like, frick, he might have been right. The skill level is off the charts. And then over the years, we've learned about his preparation, the way he thinks, his obsessiveness with everything. He didn't lift weights. He had his own custom machines for stretching, flexibility, longevity. I have nothing but mad admiration for that guy, and I've used him as examples of preparation with our players a lot. I've kept a few articles written about his preparation. Pretty amazing player. I'm a fan. I would pay money to watch Ichiro Suzuki play.
By the way, Travis, I just happened to look up your stats versus Pedro Martinez.
2 for 56 or something like that.
It says 2 or 3 for 29.
Well, I don't know. All I know is I never figured out how to hit him. I've never felt that way about another pitcher ever.
Oh,
you did hit a home run against him, though.
Yeah, I did. We were losing, and I usually terrible with facts, but I think I'm going to be roughly right. They're beating us by like 12 runs, and it's an 0-2 count, and he just throws one down the middle of the plate like you would with a 12-run lead. I hit a home run. That home run doesn't even count, in my opinion.
Right.
It wasn't really a competitive interaction, to be honest with you. So he was impressive. I have more respect for him now than I did at the time. Back then, he was sort of known for hitting people and throwing at their head and staring. And everybody that played against him, pretty much if they passed him in a dark alley, would have loved a chance to take him out. There was no love for Pedro. And I'm sure he learned some of that from like Nolan Ryan tried to be very intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in fact, he might have been the most intimidating pitcher I ever faced, to be honest with you. You guys asked me that earlier. Now that I think about it, there was a saying when I got that you were not officially a major league player until you had struck out against Nolan Ryan. And I'll tell you a quick story if y'all got a minute.
Yeah.
Nolan Ryan's 40-something years old, still throwing 96 miles an hour. It's in Tiger Stadium. It's a 1-0 ball game in the 7th inning, and he's got a no-hitter going against us. Trammell's leading off an inning. Well, Tram tries to drop a bunt. It's a 1-0 game. Like, in my view, we're playing baseball to win a game, right? I didn't have I think that's playing the game the right way. Nolan didn't like that, and the ball went foul. And Nolan strolled over, picked up the ball, walked by Alan Trammell, and goes, "That's a good way to get hurt, son." Well, Alan Trammell already had 15 or 16 years in the big leagues. He's in the Hall of Fame too. Nolan's 45, still throwing a 95, and he's telling Alan Trammell that's a good way to get hurt. That's pretty freaking intimidating.
Yeah, it is.
Nolan Ryan was he not just one of the great pitchers of all time, but he knew how to leverage his physicality, his career, his reputation to help him be a better competitor in his older years. He was very intimidating.
And that's scary to
players that were scared, literally frightened to hit off him. Like Sean Dunston was legitimately frightened of Nolan Ryan, like genuine fear. Anxiety would mount for like a day or two before if he knew he was going to be facing Nolan Ryan.
Wow. And, I just saw a recent stat, too, that he has struck out like 7 or 8 father-son combos over his career. Struck out a father in the early 70s. A son comes up in the late 80s, really struck out him, too. I mean, that's longevity.
Yeah, he pitched, I don't know how many years was it, 24, 25 years, 24.
Ridiculous, 24.
Yeah. He brilliant guy. I mean, and a wonderful human. I mean, but he asked me that, 2 most fierce competitors ever and that I played with or against is going to be Nolan Ryan and Kirk Gibson.
Wow. Kirk Gibson. Yeah. How about a TV show you're streaming now?
Oh, that's interesting. So I don't watch a lot of TV, but I do like to watch stream series or whatever because I travel so much now with my role with the Guardians. So I just finished season 2 of The Mayor of Kingstown. That was kind of good. And, I love all that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't like the one to get too little strange. I like the Homeland. I liked all that. I watching Breaking Bad, which I didn't think I would like because it's such a drug scene thing. But I think Bryan Cranston was so engaging. I really enjoyed that. Better Call Saul. I love the spinoff from that too. So yeah. But I just finished Mayor of Kingstown season 2 a couple of days ago.
Very cool. Memorable Indians moment in your 5 years with the club.
Oh, that's good. I've got a lot, obviously the World Series, but it meant a great deal to me. That first year over in Cleveland, my first chance to play in the playoffs. And when we clinched our division, my teammates asked me if I would, reveal the banner for division champs on the outfield wall.
Oh, wow.
That meant a lot to me because we had a little, not controversy, but I had rattled some cages earlier in the year. We got off to a slow start, and I was new over there, and kind of shared some perspectives on leadership and what was and wasn't taking place in Cleveland at that time in the locker room, and that wasn't well received by a couple of guys. And I was just answering a question honestly, like I'm prone to do. I wasn't trying to send a message to anybody, no intention behind it. Somebody asked me what I thought was why we were struggling. That was why I thought we were struggling. And and then as the season progressed, I think they began to understand where I was coming from and began to understand more about what leadership looked like and what it meant and how important it is in a locker room. And it's not one person. I think every player in the team is a leader in some sense. And if you're a man in general, you lead, whether it's family or people around you. And it's more about influencing people in the right direction and towards a common objective and keeping everybody focused on a common objective. And there were some people in Cleveland that were positioned to do that and weren't. And I spoke to that, and it caused some tension. But by the end of the year, we were teammates and all focused on the right things. And it meant a lot to me that they asked me to do that.
Last question. This is kind of a funny one. As you go back and you look at your career, or I watch your highlights, I've always thought about this in the last this is a non-baseball question, by the way, and you're probably thinking, what is John going to say? Probably about 15 years ago, I was watching old Indians highlights, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Travis Fryman looks like somebody. Did you ever get that you look like Christian Bale?
When I had hair, maybe. One of my coaches said I looked like Eli Manning when I had hair. He's seen my bubblegum cards. I'm an old man now. I thought you were going to bring up the fact, and all my sons like this, when Derek Jeter does the famous jump throw, that's me running to first base. Oh. And so discovered that, and all their friends realized that and have ragged me mercilessly all these years. And a lot of these younger coaches now realize that was me running too, that we hire. And they like to have a little fun with me about that. Of course, I remind them I was wearing a titanium knee brace at the time and playing with a torn posterior cruciate ligament. I wasn't running very well. but I take a lot of abuse for that. So I thought you might say something around that respect. No one's ever said Christian Bale. But
if you do a side-by-side picture of you in your playing days versus Christian Bale, probably in his early Batman years, you guys look like twin brothers.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Christian Bale, not the boxer or whatever that one was where he's all drugged out and skinny. So I'll take that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Well, and we'll end on that note, John. That was a great question. And I didn't realize you were the guy running down the baseline during that jump throw.
It's not good. And so my kids show me that often. And then anytime I'd come up to hit on the old video games, my sons and all their friends drill me every time I would be my turn to hit on the video game. So that's great fun. It is fun being the old man now. There's a few of us that work in Cleveland, and we refer to ourselves as the graybeards. There's only a couple of us around there now. We hire so many young coaches, and coaching landscape's changed a lot in pro ball. But there's us around that a resource for our younger coaches to learn what it tastes like, what it smells like, what it feels like to play in the big leagues, and the things they can't measure are doing a computer right. And so people like us can have a little more empathy for what players go through. We've been there, done that. And I think it's still important to keep those kind of people around the game. It's one of the reasons I stay in the game.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, Travis, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. You gave us so much more. We went over, I can't believe we've been sitting here for almost an hour, and it's just so kind of you to shed all these stories and just perspective. And that's one of my big words I tell my kids, and I'm glad to hear it from a veteran like yourself. So, baseball veteran Travis, thank you so much for joining us. Best of luck. God bless. Give our best to your family.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the time of day, and we'll hope the Guardians play well this year. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Travis. And remember, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at Sabol Brothers. You can follow yours truly at John_Sabol. You can follow Scotty at.
Oh, that's right. Scott Sabol, FOX. You can also follow me on Instagram. That was Twitter, the Scott Sabol FOX. And I'm on Facebook as well. But Twitter, Instagram, send us a message. Always looking for recommendations. Maybe we can try to get someone on the podcast. And you can look back. What, John? We have more than 40 episodes. I think this is episode 41, I believe.
I believe it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've been doing this now for a couple of years, everybody. So go back and check them out. And we're always looking for comments, criticisms on the podcast. So it's been fun talking to Travis Fryman, and love hearing the old stories, and looking forward to our next one, John.
If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. Helps out on the analytics side and distribution of the podcast on Apple and Spotify. So thank you for tuning in here on the Press Play Podcast Network. We'll check you guys out next time.